We're going to start with the budget session, Public
hold on a
Works. Waiting for Bill.
Okay.
Okay, we're good.
I have the shot clock of 45 minutes to try and get
Shot
done
clock,
under,
45 minutes.
Boom.
6:15.
Don will time you.
6:15.
He's got you.
Nick McGregor, Public Works, oversee that. Underneath the Public Works umbrella, we have this many budgets. I will focus on the main operating ones. Engineering, transit, street and sewer, and then property maintenance and vehicle maintenance are the five main divisions, of which several of them oversee multiple budgets. The total public works budget is 8.2 million, and I wanted to put this graph up there to show kind of where we're at when we budget versus what we actually are spending from year to year. You can see the budgeted numbers are often quite a bit higher. A lot of that is because of the commodities purchasing that we're going through, and we don't spend on fuel and whatnot. Staffing levels this year has no change in the proposed budget for any staffing. You see a little bit of a decrease from before. We had some part-time staff members that were hired on, and then we also had a port person that we used to have, and since BRE took over, they took over those responsibilities. Our funding resources, we have road use tax, which is a large share of it. We have sanitary sewer, general fund, vehicle maintenance charges. There are charges for service, which is out of engineering. State and federal assistance is transit monies. And then property maintenance and vehicle maintenance are internal service funds, so those both charge out for for what they do. This is a percentage of the expenditures in the areas that oversee them, the different budgets. Kind of broken up relatively throughout the area, so I'll just keep going. This is the divisional oversight of the different budgets. Streets and sewers oversees a fairly good share. The sanitary sewer and road use tax go into that. And then property maintenance is the next biggest one. And then transit and vehicle maintenance. Public Works admin is a $200,000 budget. It's an 8.7% increase from the previous year. General fund and road use tax, it's about 60-40 that go to fund that. It's my position at 80%, and then I have an office person. Engineering is a $578,000 budget. It's about a 3.28% increase from the previous year. Engineering has 5 staff members, including the city engineer, and then 3 techs and a civil engineer position. They are funded by the charges for service. So when they do capital projects like Aspen and Dill, for instance, we charge out a percentage, 14%. So 7% for the design and 7% for the inspection on those projects. When we get into some of the DOT projects, we're actually able to bill out at an hourly rate to get reimbursed on. But then the remaining of that is funded or is backed by sales tax, or you had used sales tax in the previous year. I think I probably just left that. I think you took it out of general fund.
Taxes now.
Transit, it's a $1.1 million budget, 1.5% increase from fiscal year 19. I should have said 20 because we're in 21's budget. Fuel, vehicle maintenance, and personnel costs are the biggest drivers in that part of the budget. We have 6 full-time full-time employees and then 7 part-time, and then I put the transit manager. As you've seen and through some of the discussion, I would greatly appreciate a transit manager position to take over some of the responsibilities that I oversee. Some of those duties include overseeing 13 personnel, managing a fleet of 15 or 14 vehicles. And then when you get into the world of transit, you have a lot of DOT requirements that need to be met through the FTA or Federal Transit Assistant Funds. There's drug and alcohol. There's DBEs, and Stephanie helps me out with that. There's a lot of requirements that are handled. And on a day-to-day basis, for instance, when we had a bus driver get assaulted on the bus, that drug me away from doing my role as Public Works Director. And so I pretty much occupied my whole day trying to respond to things like that. So A transit manager, in the past has been coupled with a engineer tech, someone that did the right-of-way permitting. We have an individual in engineering that handles that currently, but in the past, it had paired fairly well because of the driving demands of when right-of-way permits come in versus the timing with transit. So I understand that you are going to be, discussing another position with the police department. I just, would be remiss if I didn't bring up the transit manager and the value that that person would bring to our organization. I think there's a lot of things that we fall short on without a person that's able to do that job on a regular basis. Advertising, we hired out to a firm, but I think there's a lot of local drive that could be pushed towards that direction. We don't have anybody pushing towards that. I think training falls behind on our staff. We have a pretty revolving door of part-time drivers just because part-time jobs are, with no insurance. There's really no benefits behind them, so we have a lot of people that kind of circulate in and out of the part-time position, and sometimes the training does not follow with that type of revolving door. So there are multiple reasons why I think that value, there's value in that position, but I know that you have a decision in front of you on what you're going to be doing.
So let me ask you a question, if this doesn't throw you off. How much time do you estimate you're spending on transit now? I'm not going to hold you to it, just a guess percentage.
That's a tough one. Certain weeks are very heavy. We have a time coming up where we have to get into public hearings and setting all those up to get the funding for next year's operating. I would say I spend probably about 5 hours a week, checking in, making sure that things are okay. I'd say about 5 hours a week.
So you spoke of funding. Do you think, and this obviously speculation, but we get federal monies, correct, depending on ridership? It remind me that because we have two new people, you might want to discuss that.
Yeah, and I have that in
Oh,
my
you do?
next
Okay,
slide.
wow, didn't mean to stop.
No, you're right. Funding so I'll jump into it. So that doesn't look very big, does it? So the funding formula that we have for transit is dependent upon, it goes for the state and the FTA and the STA funds. So it's state transit assistance and then federal transit assistance are a big portion of the budget that fund transit. About $100,000 a year in transit fares, and we back it, and you can see it's really small, about $250,000 last year in local taxes supported transit. We have a levy, a transit levy, but then we also back the rest of it through the general fund. So $650,000 a year in transit assistance comes from the DOT. So that's a big portion of how it funds.
750.
750? Terrible at math, obviously.
But it is based on your total miles driven and your ridership.
And ridership.
Okay.
And last year I had a slide in that showed kind of where we sit. We're compared to the other small urban systems, so Clinton, Fort Dodge, Muscatine.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Nick, can you say that last sentence again? Clinton, Fort Dodge, and what?
The small urban systems are Clinton, Fort Dodge, Muscatine,
Marshalltown.
Ottumwa, Marshalltown, us.
Okay,
So there's 8 of us, I think.
okay, thanks.
Actually, I think Marshalltown's under Dodge, aren't they? Or Dart, Des Moines area. They're not, they have their own regional. Property maintenance, as I said in the past, is an internal service fund. So they bill out on an hourly basis to the departments that use their services to perform, plumbing, electrical, carpentry, that type of work. Property maintenance, that also oversees all the buildings, the auditorium, the port, the senior center, the public works building, the depot. And they also oversee the traffic signals and the public lighting. So if you ever see somebody out in a boom truck fixing a traffic light, that is us.
So as you look at those, like the auditorium, for example, $250,000 of that expenditure that he's showing there is a contract with BRE. The other 128 is a combination of insurance, his property maintenance costs,
And utilities.
and utilities. and then some basic repairs and equipment.
For instance, our time this last year has been fairly heavy property maintenance in the auditorium and port. Just trying to get some of that. We didn't do all the cleanup, but we were in there a lot, spending our time to organize stuff. The parking, I didn't talk about that. The parking fund, so when it snowed this last weekend, property maintenance plows the parking lots. And so that's funded through parking fees and leases.
Yeah, well, that's a special revenue fund, so we have all the revenues go into it. Then there are two different divisions for parking. Chief went over Vicky's piece for parking enforcement, and then Nick's maintenance is the other component of that, so you have two different expenditure accounts within that, with the basic revenue. Overall, it's about a $75,000 or $80,000 budget.
There are 6 individuals that work there, 1 part-time and 5 full-time members. We have an electrician on board. We have a guy that can basically fabricate anything from metal. So we've got a diverse group in property maintenance on kind of what they do. Vehicle maintenance, $963,000 budget. There are 3 full-time staff members and a part-time member. Ron Phillips was hired as the vehicle maintenance manager when I came on in 16. I think he's improved a lot of things from a function standpoint. We have seen costs increase. The big part of the increase this last year is about a $50,000. Personnel costs actually went down. The big cost is fuel. Fuel pumps out at Public Works go through this budget, and we increase it this next year just with the uncertainty with the way fuel prices have gone. Streets and sewers is the biggest group out there. There's 15 staff members, where they have a $3.5 million budget. They oversee the sewer collection system, meaning all the sewer pipes and then some of the lift stations. And then they also plow the snow, fix the roads, crack seal, stripe the roads. They do small patching, most of the work that you see like on Agency Street over the last couple of years or Mount Pleasant Street, that's all contracted work. We do smaller patching. We don't have enough staff members to be able to do that big of a job.
Within this area, you talk about your staff doing both streets and sewers. You're split about 50-50 between road use tax for personnel costs and then sewer fund.
Correct.
So this is a spot where you see that Don's department crosses over with Nick's within the sewer department. The sewer has the sewer administration, and they have their plant maintenance staff, and then they have the sewer system, the larger sewer system staff, which reports under Nick as a third cost component of the sewer budget. So they have to have some level of interplay for how that funding stream gets used.
The one thing I wanted to talk about, it's not part of the proposed budget. It's not something that I had even really spoke about with Jim. But as we grow, accepting new infrastructure we have new subdivisions where we take the roadways and sewers. It all takes more time. We have to plow all those roads for snow, and so I know that there are a lot of questions about what takes long on certain things. I could see the benefit of adding another staff member or 2 to the street sewer division. It doesn't have any liability on the general fund. However, I understand that adding staff has a cost. But I think we will need that as we continue to grow infrastructure. I don't think we're not decreasing in the amount of infrastructure that we maintain. So I can talk about the capital improvement plan unless you have any questions about operating budgets. Okay? So in front of you is the vehicle and equipment request for CIP items. Most of this was in the previous capital improvement plan. A lot of these are Chris's, or the streets and sewers. He's very good at planning out kind of the needs of the different equipment that he'll need. I highlighted 2 areas because the one on top, bus replacement, I've changed every single year that I've been here. Nothing has been the same, mostly because it's highly dependent upon funding from the DOT on capital purchases. I was lucky to be notified that we have 3 buses that are up for replacement. I haven't seen a DOT contract on that, so don't know when that'll be. I mean, and not only that, it takes 10 to 11 months to get a new bus, so it won't be around for a while. But I would say that is probably our biggest downfall in transit, is our equipment is getting old. It's starting to get wore down. And so in the budget, I have 5 years of buses. The 120,000 is a medium-duty bus. In the detail of the CIP, you'll see where we had planned on 80-20 match grants from the DOT, and then we're using sales tax as the match for that percentage. The other thing that I have highlighted a ways down is the $310,000 for a street sweeper. Typical mechanical street sweepers are in the 210,000. The reason for the 310 is the need for a vacuum unit to be able to clean pervious pavement, something that we will be getting with the Tiger grant, and then another project that I'll be talking about a little bit later. I have that built into the CIP. We're going to explore. There's a unit that you can add on the back of a vac truck that we have for relatively nominal dollars. Purchase that, and then kind of use it as a vacuum cleaner that you would have a man actually stand behind and walk along the pervious pavement. I think the biggest question is the amount of time that would take versus having a vac unit. The problem with a vac unit like this is their life expectancy is a couple years shorter because of the pieces of equipment that are in it versus a mechanical one. So you spend more money and get less time out of it, which is kind of a hesitation for me. So I wanted to put it in the CIP so that way we could plan for it, but we will explore that as we get closer to the pending pervious pavement and those type of purchases.
So that's just I'm not an engineer, so if this is a stupid question. That's just to vacuum the dust and dirt and debris out so it allows the pavement, the permeable pavement to drain?
Yeah, it functions like I mean, you've seen the street sweepers with the brooms that go around. It essentially just pulls it up. It has to create kind of a seal against it, and that's what goes bad. So it goes over the top of the pervious pavement and pulls up all the sediment and whatnot in between the pavers.
All right.
We have, I don't want to go over it and gloss over, we have a fairly long list of street equipment, a walk-behind concrete saw, a pavement breaker, a compressor, a tar kettle. We use all those in the function of taking care of the streets, and I'd be more than happy to answer questions about them. But we say a Craftco, but that's just a brand. So,
And as you look through that list of equipment, the majority of them, the ones that show the street sewer designation at the beginning of them, the cost on those are split 50-50 between sewer and road use tax. The other pieces of equipment, like the snow operating equipment, are paid completely out of road use tax. So it looks like you've got a little bit of the asphalt equipment is done completely out of road use tax, but then the majority of the rest is split.
Well, I'll start into the construction projects. First, I'll look at the 21 projects. I'll talk about the Riverfront and Tiger, seal coat, and then the stuff that I covered in the 5-year road plan. I just want to reiterate what we're doing for this next calendar year or fiscal year, and then some of the out-year projects that have some pretty good magnitude. So some of the lesser projects that we have coming up in fiscal year 21, we have, every year we budget $25,000 for LED replacement. As we've talked about some of the street lights in town, Alliant does maintain a lot of the street lights. However, the city of Burlington does own and operate a lot of street lights themselves. Roosevelt Corridor, for instance, is something that we maintain. We did an LED replacement 5 years ago, pretty close to that. And so we buy lights to replace them out of that budget line. I have battery backup on here. In the detail of that, we would like to battery back up a couple of other intersections. In previous budgets over the last 3 years, we've bought battery backups for the Roosevelt corridor. And one of the things that we went through, Alliant, we would lose power from Alliant, and all the Roosevelt corridor in certain segments would go dead. And so we'd have to go out there and, PD would have to be involved. We'd have to wheel out stop signs. But with the battery backups, we can run full color for 4 hours and then red flash for up to 8 hours. So if you have a pending, emergency disaster of some sort, we could run those lights and still function. And those battery backups would go on West Burlington Ave, I believe, and Columbia. And then we have a rooftop unit at Public Works for $9,000, similar to the roof being replaced last year. The building is starting to show some of its age. I think we've had a lot of problems with this unit, but we're trying to replace that. The traffic control pod detection, we have $16,000 budgeted this year, and then we have another set amount budgeted for fiscal year, it's on here, for next year. So we did the pod detection. It's the traffic control system that we installed at Central and Division for the failing loop system that was there. We have several other intersections that are loop controlled, and we've seen the value in these pucks. They're much more responsive than the old loop system is, and so we'd like to try and spend some money on the intersections to get their controls under. We budgeted $14,000 for fiscal year '21 for energy improvements in the Public Works building. When it was built, we used a lot of pressure sodium lights. We don't have any LED in there, so we'd like to try and make some energy improvements there. And then the salt dome roof, that is a facility that houses the salt for winter function, and so it's a pretty corrosive area. We need to get the roof replaced on that. Oh, I didn't say anything about the funding on that, did I? The battery backup, the traffic control are all road use. The salt dome is road use, and then the other 2 units are split between road use and sanitary sewer.
Nick, I have a question on
Go
the
ahead.
battery backup. So on the Columbia Street, can you move those battery backups if we, with the Tiger Grant, there was some talk of going to stop signs downtown, can you move those battery backups?
Sorry, Columbus.
Columbus,
I misspoke.
oh, I thought you said Columbia.
Agency in Columbus.
Okay.
Sorry, not
Gotcha.
Columbia. My
Okay.
bad.
Makes better sense, thanks.
So one of the big projects, I wanted to try and give you what it involves. I had it on the CIP last year. It is a kind of a floating manhole. You can kind of see it sitting up. It shouldn't be that high up. You can see the pipe below that. And a lot of sanitary sewer water comes from the Sunnyside area and comes underneath the tracks and flows down the Hawkeye Creek in the sanitary line, but kind of it follows that pathway. And so we need to rehab that. The difficulty is, one, trying to get to it. It's in a fairly ravine area, and we don't own any of the land next to it. Not only that, we have to work with BNSF to get the proper easements, and then we have to operate underneath of their facilities. It's a tricky project, but there's a lot of environmental liability there. Should we have a big gully washer rain and it knocks out the manhole, I mean, we would have raw sewage going down the Hawkeye Creek. So we need to look at getting that fixed, and it's in this fiscal year budget. The riverfront projects, I have the flood protection on there is the one that'll happen most recent or current. It'll happen this next year is the flood wall work on the north and south of the work that we had just previously did. It'll shore up the tie-offs, where the HESCO breached. It'll take care of that, where that area failed. And that's $4.2 million, and we're using tax increment finance to fund that. The rest in the Tiger Grant is all grant funds. The $400,000 for Great Places. Did you talk about that, Eric? Didn't. I think that's a $300,000 grant with a $100,000 match from the city to do splash pad and shade structure type work. I think it's going to happen contingent with the Tiger Grant. And then we have $2.3 million in boating infrastructure funds. I think there's some question on whether or not that project happens from a funding source, right? On the
We're
grant.
still waiting from we're tentatively awarded boating infrastructure grant, design funds over a year ago, and had a contract that, the only thing I know that needed changed was the mayor's signature line. And we've been waiting for over a year to get this thing done with no substantive changes, and the state says they're continuing that it's just about ready, but at this point, I don't know that this is happening. And so we need to be able to, we're still have it as part of the design in here, but it may end up not being something that occurs. I can't recommend funding 2.3 million if we lose 1.7 million of federal funds.
And then the other two flood mitigation projects that are on there, I put the most recent iteration of the phasing below, so you can kind of understand what those projects are. In fiscal year '23, the $4.8 million project would be stormwater pumps at the location where we put the temporary ones in. It involves some other pipe work, but it's the stormwater pumps. And then in fiscal year '25, it's the $7.2 million project. It is some wall work further down Market Street, but also at the wastewater treatment plant, right?
No,
No, I lied. Sorry.
you did.
I didn't lie, I just didn't tell you the truth.
Yeah. You don't have the extended pricing on
I
it.
don't either. I don't know why I put that in there
So
to confuse
your
myself.
slide there is gonna confuse,
Yeah, it
almost
is.
as much as what I confuse this whole discussion topic. The amounts of 4.8 million is probably, I'm trying to go off of your sheet because it's different.
It's because there's,
Is that your phase 3? It is. It's your phase 3 extended out an extra 1 or 2 years beyond what the engineers had put on it.
I'll
The
blame that.
7.2 million is a phase 9.
Correct.
uh,
Engineering on
Extended
those.
out several years beyond what the engineers had put on their estimate. And Nix does not have the flood protection at the sewer plant. It's funded in the sewer budget, and it's listed separately under the sewers list of projects. So, out of the different flood protection improvement projects, the 4.2 million, as Nick mentioned, is gonna be strictly on TIF. If we get reimbursements from the state at an appropriate amount, we may be able to reimburse some of that, I'm not sure. The 4.8 will be a GO bond that will be reimbursed from the state. The 7.2 million, we will do a portion of that bonded. We're hoping that we got enough money coming in that a portion of that project will be paid for out of actual sales tax collections from the increment from the state. The flood wall work down at the sewer treatment plant is projected to be done out of TIF financing. So, and we're just, when it comes to a lot of the sewer infrastructure, I mean, that was from the original application, we'd done the 3.7, or whatever the work that was gonna be done down at the sewer plant, listed that as either TIF or sewer revenue debt, but we can't get to all the work with sewer revenue. And so we're stretched to try to make sure that we can get what needs to be done in an appropriate funding mechanism.
We have 3 other sewer projects listed for the next year. Miscellaneous sewer rehab, you've heard us talk about that unfortunately more than we should have to, for the projects that we've had to use for it. This budget has been used for kind of the emergency repairs that we don't plan on. However, when Jim set up this funding, it was to do other work like sewer lining, sewer replacement, certain planned type work. And over the next 5 years, you see that I've asked for him to increase it by 25,000. I just have 300,000 for fiscal year '21, but over the next 5 years to increase to 400,000. We have several things that we're gonna be needing to do. I'd like to try and inspect and do some rehab on the arch sewers. For instance, the angular arch sewer has some homes that are built on top of it. And seeing how we've had problems in other areas, it's probably time that it needs to be, one, inspected and then maybe fixed. We may have to do some property acquisition if there's things that can't be done, but it's something that we need to take a look at pretty seriously. We have flow meters, $100,000 budgeted. We did purchase some last year. We're gonna need some more to be able to keep up with information, consent order type work, to be able to know what we're actually even discharging. Our methodology right now is not very scientific or accurate, so we need to move in that direction. We have Locust-sponsored project, 620. I actually have pictures of that to be able to show you kind of what that project is. When we did the Locust sewer separation project through SRF, which is State Revolving Fund, we're eligible for $620,000 worth of monies to be spent on a green infrastructure project. It started out as a bioswale, but because of some of the costs that we were looking into, it's looking like we're targeting more of a parking lot, permeable pavement at the Grimes School. So it'll actually take quite a bit of the roof work off of there and it can drain directly into the permeable pavement chamber underneath. So you'll be seeing that actually come here relatively quickly. Seal coat, some reason we don't put this in the 5-year road plan. We kind of meandered our way through 7 years, and previous city engineers, we need to continue to work on seal coat. It's $400,000 in road use tax funds that funds this. Based on previous years' numbers, this is kind of a rudimentary map showing you the areas that we'll try and target over the next year in seal coat. For instance, this previous year we did Louisa Street and then I think some of Denmark. But this is maybe a little bit better idea visually what we're going to try and tackle with seal coat project. So I discussed this in the 5-year road plan, but I wanted to talk about it because I hear it all the time. When are you going to work on Central? Fiscal year 21 is more than just these two projects. It's the North Hill asphalt, which you'll actually probably see come as a change order or an extension of the work because we have a contractor in that neighborhood and we'll be able to save mobilization fees on that. And then Central is a asphalt mill and fill project from Angular all the way down to Harrison. And I did not put the Dalbar retrofit in there, but that's included in the monies that we've got allocated. So the RR&R program, or the Reconstruction, Rehab, and Resurface project, has typically been about $1.5 million every year. We kind of moved away from that because we have some projects that need to be tackled, and I'll get to the other ones. Some of the out-year sewer projects, we have Market Street force main replacement, and that is actually going to be kind of contingent, or not contingent, it'll be associated with the work for the Market Basin sewer separation. These projects will be done simultaneously with the Tiger Grant project, since we're going in there and ripping up Main Street. Pavement replacement is the big cost when you do sewer work like that, so it makes sense to go in there and do that type of work. So those two projects are total $3.3 million combined, but it's out of tax increment financing. The Brooks Basin infiltration and inflow, we will do some more smoke testing, and then it'll involve some lining and maybe some spot replacement. We actually have a project on the books for this year, not to that magnitude, but more work needs to be done. Unfortunately, when it comes to lining, sometimes money doesn't go very far, but it is beneficial because you don't have to go in there and you have to disrupt the whole area to try and save the pipe work. In fiscal year 23, $4.7 million on the South Street list. You didn't talk about that, did you? You did think so. Out of the sewer master plan, we talked about the need to upgrade the lift stations, and so we brought that into this year. And then in fiscal year 23, and then the corresponding years of 24 and 25, and actually fiscal year 26, is the Mississippi Interceptor to start planning funding for that work. So That sewer line ends at the end of Harrison Street, and it carries currently sanitary sewer water. In the past, it was combined water. It takes it down the bluff, along parallel to the river, in some cases, when the river's high, under the river, and then it takes over to the wastewater treatment plant as a reverse siphon. I think it's a massive environmental liability should we have a break. There's very little means to be able to get in there and access that sewer line. And so what this Mississippi Interceptor project would involve is through a series of lift stations, taking a new sewer line down Main Street. It's part of the project that I kind of alluded to during the 5-year road plan, with some sort of funding capability for Cascade Bridge, with a build grant. I think you could leverage your funds that you're spending in that. So you may see us, as we try and do this project, come up with some sort of bigger project of the whole.
That would be our match.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know the percentages with the overall project, but
Right.
we'd have to start looking at that.
Given that there's one build grant award per state annually, the chances that we are successful on that are small, but I
Slim to
mean,
none.
there's still a chance.
I talked about the RR&R program. This is one of the projects that kind of breaks what we had traditionally been doing. It's the Harrison Street project from Maine all the way to Summer. It's a full depth reconstruction with some sanitary sewer separation, estimated at $4.8 million or $9 million. And it is used GO money, is general obligation bonding money is used to pay for it. We actually have a meeting with the engineering group that we hired Stanley Consultants here on Friday to go over this project. So you'll notice that we have a sewer line, a storm sewer line, kind of going down Miller, turning down Dunham, and then going towards the area just east of James Madison School. There's some property acquisition that would come with that. We've tentatively had a conversation with the school district about their willingness to use that land. It's pretty heavily wooded, and there's a ravine in there. I know that they had some discussions about redeveloping that area, but I think that these would still fit within that. I think the trickier part is to try and get a sewer line kind of between properties. There's one that's kind of sits back on each side of the property line. I think you could fit it right through the property line, but we'll get through that as we get into the details of it. But this is kind of the idea, in my opinion, of what an integrated management plans project would entail, is not just going in there and doing one thing, but accomplishing more than that, especially when something needs to be done. Washington Street is an out-year project. Should have changed it from SDP. They change their acronyms all the time. But this is a 24 project. It was currently planned, I think start even this year was the capable funding source for it with the STP grant money. It estimated at $4.8 million with $867,000 in grant funds, using tax increment financing as the remainder of that money. It would involve full depth replacement from Front to at least 6th Street, and then do similar type design things as what we're going to try and do with Jefferson Street and Main Street, bring in a little bit more trees, maybe some more lighting, things like that. And that is my presentation. Under 45 minutes, I'd like to.
I had a quick question that I didn't understand. Just for clarification, you said, we don't know what, we are discharging. Our methodology is not very selective. What did you mean by that?
So whenever we have a rain event and our sewers in the combined system become overwhelmed, they discharge out through the CSO outfalls. Our methodology right now is to determine whether or not a block had been washed off, and then based on the size of the pipe, we can kind of determine volume.
Okay.
But other than that, it is kind of a guess.
So you mean it's discharging into the river?
Correct.
Okay.
Why do you keep looking back?
Well, yeah, he's got
He's got all the answers.
he's
back.
got 30 plus years of wisdom to look to.
So on the transit position, does it have to be tied to an engineer position?
I think the rationale as through why it would be is because you can charge out for the hours of service of that other half through engineering's charges. We've done a lot better recently because of the number of projects in engineering as to what amount is backed by general fund. And so I think that's the reason why it would make sense. I think there's a need also. Right-of-way work, we've gotten a lot better at. We have an individual now that is going after people that are doing things in the right-of-way that they shouldn't be. It's also very time-consuming at times. And I think if we could shift gears and have that person handle that, or have the person that would be doing transit work help with some contract documentation, putting RFPs together for the city engineer, I think a lot of his time gets taken away from doing design, engineering work to doing more administrative things. So I think I think it makes good sense to pair those two together. However, if you'd fully fund that position, I could see it being, there's plenty of work to do. And if not in transit, I could find other things.
I know that if we had that other position there, if that was the right person, and Annette would really love to have somebody who we were able to put some contract administration duties on, and take that off of Jesse, and have somebody who's really focused on that and can do it in a way that an accountant looks at it instead of how an engineer looks at it. But
It's not the same way.
it
No,
apparently
definitely
isn't the same way.
Well, I guess that's what makes it difficult. Obviously, and obviously it's all guesstimation, but if that position was funded, would we realize some revenue increase in our transit? By being a little more efficient and spending more time on working on that, both on advertising and funding it, and also would we lessen some engineering fees? And those are all things we don't know. So I don't know. I just want to have some discussion about it, because we have discussed some other positions. By the same token, there's a big part of me, I'll be honest with you, I don't want to increase any taxes. Because we already, in my mind, went through a property tax increase with the county reevaluation. So that's why I was asking the questions earlier.
It's $90K for a transit officer, right?
Yeah,
That
that's,
was the number?
Full benefits, right?
Well,
yeah,
you have to
figure,
make that
if
assumption.
you
That's a
figure
tied
that somebody's
position.
coming in on family
Yeah.
benefits, that's about where it would be.
So if we do it, we'll be looking for a bus driver / accountant / engineer. So,
Grab bag.
I don't think that there's gonna be that much engineer involved with their position, but, that's the department that I'd see that you put them in, but it's more about doing the contractual side that I think could see. It's that, or, we're doing what ifs.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're
we're doing
looking
what
at,
ifs.
from what we see as the pieces that are missing in engineering, and it is a combination of that contract administration and it's right-of-way. Right-of-way isn't necessarily engineering, we've got stuff that's going on in the right-of-way around town that we don't have anyone who's really been well dedicated to.
In
Deal
the
with.
past, people did kind of what they wanted. I will say Scott,
Has helped that.
he's done a heck of a lot better job. There's at times where we don't need to spend as much time in right-of-way, permitting type work. But it's there. There's a lot of work done out there in the right-of-way, and sometimes we pay the price because people will go digging in the roadway and don't repair the roadway like they need to. So then we end up spending city tax dollars to go back and replace it as it should have been. So,
Okay.
other places do charge for right-of-way permits. I don't know that that benefits us. I think that the fees that you get out of that are relatively nominal. Plus, it pushes people away from getting the permit. All we want to know is, from a right-of-way perspective, is that people are doing what they're doing and that they're doing it correctly and replacing the pavement. So,
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for me?
Yeah, I did have one more question for you, Nick. So with, helping out with the buses, and then you got the sewer project and the roads and all the other things that you got going on, do you think that we give you enough to do?
I always,
Nice laugh.
I never shy away from work.
Thank you.
Jimmy, have anything to add? Anybody else have any questions? Hey, Nick, we didn't say you were done yet.
You just walked away. What if we had more questions?
Where are you going?
What the heck?
Wow.
All right, we're done.
I do have to say something. You didn't talk about, we need to do an ADA study. You want to kind of address what you're looking at there?
So this all kind of came up. We have an ADA audit in fiscal year '22 planned for $50,000 to have an agency come in and do an audit of all the facilities. The reason why it became an issue is during we actually got a letter from the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office out of Kansas City for the depot when kind of hounded on Amtrak about getting the lease. And it brought awareness of the issues that kind of comes with ADA compliance. I think Dubuque and Des Moines, or not Dubuque, Cedar Rapids and Des Moines would attest to the value of having an audit and then a compliance plan drafted. Because right now they have a consent order that tells them that they will spend so much money per year to bring crosswalks, push button things inside certain buildings up to code because they didn't have a plan in place that says, listen, we know things are out of compliance. This building is almost 100 years old. There are surely things in this building that are not compliant. And if you at least have an audit done and a plan set forth on what you're going to do, you can kind of stave away the U.S. Attorney's Office from coming in and telling you what you're going to do.
Or
So-
get them to cooperate to extend the time
Correct.
required to get it done.
But as you notice, with that doing a facility audit in '22, we don't have costs built in here for out years, but there will be a schedule that ends up coming out of that for work that we'll be programming into our CIP afterwards.
Outside of the 50,000 that we budget already for.
Correct, for roadway,
you
but
do-
you can include that conversation.
Yeah, that'll be a part of it, but this is gonna be much larger than just the ADA transitions on the corners. So that's the one thing I noticed that didn't get hit on by anyone.
Okay.
With that, I think that kind of covers everything that, all the different departments that are out there. I'm done with you.
Oh, okay.
Again, as a reminder, the CIP, I'm gonna have to make sure I check with folks back here. CIP is now on the website, or no? Current CIP on the website? On OpenGov. OpenGov has all of our revenues, expenditures within it that are being proposed. We are looking at maintaining our existing property tax levy. We have a balanced budget. You do have this next year, as we talked about, actually 110,000 one-time dollars that could be allocated to something that we haven't discussed. You've talked a little bit about 2 or 3 different positions, and I assume that as we go to move into Thursday's budget meeting, that's really kind of saying, what are we wanting to do that's different from here? I don't know what else to provide for a backdrop, but we do need to have something that, for a plan on what you're trying to accomplish for Thursday.
Well, there you have it, guys. So we have to decide, we're gonna need to, Thursday's gonna be the day if you feel that there's
Thursday.
if you feel that there is a need to fund a position that has been asked for, we're gonna have to figure out if we decide to do that, how we're gonna pay for it, and whether we use, that savings, but then you gotta figure out what's year 2, what's year 3, what's year 4.
Right,
So-
some sustainable.
Right, so, plan on Thursday hashing that out, because we have to give staff an answer that night, so, right?
Yep. And then are you here for Copco on? Bill. Just Bill? And I didn't ask. Sorry.
I'm not here for,
No, you're
I
not.
don't know.
oh, Bill,
Never mind.
It's Bill Moppin, we can check with him. Anything else then? All right, anybody have anything else here? No? Let's move on.
All right.